Hello, my name is Jaden, and welcome to my channel. I am a Bible-believing street preacher based in New York City. And today's video is going to be on why I'm not an atheist. This is going to be the first of many other videos that have to do with the cults. I've already done other ones on why I'm not certain denominations. This one's going to be on why I'm not of other false religions and cults. And yes, atheism, it is a religion. So now atheism in its current form, it's a new age atheism. It takes a different form than the atheism that existed even 200 years ago. But it doesn't really matter what form it takes. It's still the same stupid religion. And so I'm going to go through, uh, well, before I even get into what the Bible says about it, I actually just want to show you how utterly ridiculous atheism is. And I'm actually going to go to the root of the problem. Now, the problem with Christian apologetics is that they spend so much time appealing to secular evidence and secular archaeology, and they're always trying to reason with the atheists and try to give enough evidence to prove that God is real and that uh, that this is why you should believe in this and that. But the problem with the atheist is it has nothing to do with knowledge or intellect. It has nothing to do with how much evidence there is available for anything. Their problem is the issue of their heart and not their head. They don't like a God who's going to hold them accountable. They don't like a God who's going to keep record of what they're doing and intervene in their life because they want to do what they want to do. And so the religion, it's very pretty and desirable because it allows you to justify anything, right? Now, there are different kinds of atheists. There's the hardcore atheists, the ones that are they're just anti-Christian. They hate specifically Christianity because these guys don't target Islam. They don't target other religions. They just target Christianity because the God of the Bible is the only one that convicts you of your sin, really. Then there are other atheists where I put them in the young people brainwashed category. They're just going through school and being taught this, and they're not even thinking about why they believe it, and they're just utterly brainwashed. Okay. Then there's the traumatized atheist. These are the people that something really bad happened to them. So they came up with the idea of there must be no God, because if there was God, then how could this happen to me? But even those people, while they are traumatized and something bad happened to them, even God doesn't let them off the hook. And I'm going to show you some stuff from the scriptures in a bit. Um, that being said, let's actually go through the creation of God. So, okay, and the creation of God, I mean the beginning of the universe. So you got to understand that in order for the universe to have come into existence, there is only four possibilities. There's only four possibilities without exception. You can read 1 billion documents by Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and all these guys. You can read all this stuff about cosmic skeptic and all these supposed great Christian, great atheist wise men that they have so much knowledge and philosophy and blah, blah, whatever. But you can just throw that in the garbage. It's going to be summed up into these four potential ways that creation came into existence. Okay. The first one is that nothing came into existence accidentally. Accidentally. Now, the second possibility is that nothing became something supernaturally. Put a little hyphen here. All right. The third possibility is that it's always been here. The universe has always been here. And the fourth possibility is that it's an illusion. It's an illusion. Okay, now let's go one by one. I always do things step by step. Let's go one by one. Let's start with the idea of nothing accidentally. Okay, so the universe was just, there was nothing. It was just oblivion, and then this massive world came into existence. Right? Let's go with that idea. Okay, well, first of all, for you to believe something so stupid, you have to deny basic 5th grade physics. First law of thermodynamics. First law of thermodynamics says matter cannot be what? Created or destroyed. This is basic 5th grade science. This isn't even something you have to be taught in school. Every farmer, they know this. Okay? Everybody knows this. Like, If matter can't be created or destroyed, and yet it exists, well, who put it there? Somebody put it there, because if it can't be created or destroyed, you're going to run into another problem. I'm going to show you what that problem is in a minute. Let's skip the second one for now. This second one, it's always been here. Well, if it's always been here, what you're teaching is that the universe is eternal. Now, is the universe eternal? If the universe is eternal, you're breaking the second law of thermodynamics. What's the second law of thermodynamics? The second law of thermodynamics is that entropy. What is entropy? Entropy, in minor words, simply means that everything winds down, everything breaks down. How do you know that? How don't you know that? These atheists are always walking around talking about how the universe is millions of years old, millions of years old. They say for evolution to come into existence, it just took millions and millions and millions of years. Do you even remember what you had for breakfast the other day, man? Right? I don't. Everything breaks down. You ever own a car? You know what happens to the car? You can get it polished and fixed all you want, but after 20, 30 years, the car will break down. You will never be able to bring it back to the original condition you found it in. Never. It breaks down. You know why you die? Because you have to put something into your mouth to gain more energy. And your system that digests your food is going to break it down more slowly because there's less energy. Now, these guys are always talking about, oh, well, no. Entropy, yeah, the universe can't be a closed system because entropy only works on a closed system. Dude, what are you talking about? We're in a closed system. Animals, they die. Things wither. They pass away. If I leave a chair for 100 years in the same area, after 100 years, what happens to the chair? It rusts. It withers out. It loses strength. It breaks down. Everything breaks down. Charles Darwin had no idea what he was talking about. He was a moron. He said everything got better and better and better. Are you kidding? Like, does that even make any sense? So they want you to believe that this entropy has nothing to do with it. And if you're teaching that the universe has always been here, you're saying it's eternal. You know what that means? That means that if the universe is eternal, then you're in eternity. And what does that make you? A god. A god. That's the stuff of Hinduism, man. Are you kidding? So these guys, they're always talking about, my bad. These guys are always talking about, well, okay, the universe has always been here. This is just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. You can just get that from observing the world around you. You can just get that from looking anywhere. Okay? Nothing in the world persists. It doesn't get better and better. I mean, think about how stupid this is. If humanity took millions of years to evolve, why did we evolve into such a state where we're so fragile you can die to nothing? If it took 1,000,000 years to evolve us to get us here, wouldn't we be superhumans by now? But the point is, the universe can't be eternal, or it can't have been millions of years old. No millions of years. Why? If the system we're in is always breaking down and things are always collapsing and getting worse and worse and worse, well, what do you think happens when you add 1,000,000 years to the equation? Well, by the end of the 100,000th year, the system will have molded down into a gray mush and then just collapse on itself. See, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all to have this millions of years number. But you know why they use this? They need this to be true because evolution it's impossible without large mass of time. Because evolution is the biggest gambling set ever. What they want you to believe with evolution is that if I have nothing, right? Basic math, and I add nothing, I get something. Okay, is that what you observe in the universe? Do you observe nothing and then just something just coming out and you're getting something? Right? These guys are getting so desperate to prove this. What they're now doing is they're going with this thing called abiogenesis. They're trying to test in labs if you can produce life from nothing, from inanimate matter. You can't do that, man. These guys are fighting with the most basic laws of physics. Energy can't be created or destroyed, so the world couldn't have come into nothing accidentally. Why? Because the stuff that's in the system is breaking down. And because it's breaking down, well, what happens? This millions of years doesn't work because after a million years, the system collapses. There's no more energy because at some point you're going to run out of energy. See how simple that is? It's that simple. So then how about this last one? It's an illusion. Well, if it's an illusion, right? What's stopping you from just offing yourself? There would be no point. If it's an illusion, nothing is real. And if nothing is anything, then you just do what you want, man. See, it's ridiculous. This idea is completely ridiculous that there is no God. I'm going to show you some even more ideas, some more problems with this. Okay, so then the only logical conclusion you're left with is that something came in supernaturally. Now let's do some, look, again, basic science. Basic science. Let's start with the actual construct of the universe. Okay, so you have time, space, matter, right? Okay, let's look at this very simply. Time, space, and matter, right? Okay, now, could you put two of these into existence without the third one? Well, the answer is no, you couldn't. If I have time and space, time is elapsing and there's space, but there's nothing in this, there's nothing in that space. So how does space exist? It doesn't. If I have time and matter, but no space, well, where's the matter going? There's no space to put it in because space doesn't exist. See that? How about this one? If I have matter and space, but there's no time. Okay, so then when is it coming into existence? They want you to believe that there's no God and that God had nothing to do with it. It just happened. But how did nothing know when to put it in if there's no nothing? Which in itself is a paradox. If there's nothing to put it in, then there's nothing to put it in. It just keeps going and going and going, right? So as you can see here, this doesn't make any sense. You have to have all three come in at the same time to work. That's just basic common sense. Who wouldn't know that except some hyper overeducated guy who goes to college and doesn't know how to think, right? But again, like I'm telling you, it's not about intellect and knowledge. These people, they know this. They know this. They know all this. But they're pretending that they don't know, right? So then what do these guys end up doing? They say, well, there's no God. So, if a God exists, why would he allow so much evil, right? If God exists, why this, why that? But you know what they're subtly saying? They're saying that if they were God, they wouldn't do things the way our God does things. And what are they trying to say? They're trying to say that they're better than him. See, now, earlier in the beginning, I said that atheism is a religion. If there's no God, you are God and you decide everything. But what's the problem with that? There's a massive, massive problem with that. Let's look at Romans chapter 2. Romans chapter 2. Romans chapter 2. See, the problem is that Christians are always trying to convince the atheist of the Bible, but you've already fumbled the bag by doing that. They don't need you. You don't have to convince them of anything. If they're asking you these stupid questions, they're not asking you because they want to know. They're asking you to get you because their whole thing is mocking. It's mocking. Okay. How can these guys sit on YouTube, like Sam Harris and these guys, and they're like, oh, they're out here, they're out here literally saying, if God exists, he writes my name in the stars and he says, I am God. I'm still not going to believe him. That is the sign of a deluded fool who has no interest in learning the truth. Okay. You know how ridiculous this is? For all 6,000 years of human history, everybody knew a God exists. It's only these guys that they're so special that they think they found this little thing where there's no God. And it's like, okay, well, you played yourself. You've now made a fool of yourself because pretty much everybody up until now knows a God exists. It's just these guys that think that there isn't one. right? Romans chapter 2. Okay, let's look at Romans chapter 2 and verse 12. For as many as have sinned without law shall also perish without law, and as many as have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. For the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature these things contained in the law, these things, having not the law, are a law unto themselves, showing the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the mean, while accusing or excusing one another. Okay, so these Gentiles, they don't have the law of Moses, as in, which is to say that they haven't read it, okay? But they have it in their heart, or rather, their heart right here. So even though God's never spoken it to them, they know it intrinsically because God has revealed it to them in their conscience. Okay. So now what the atheists will do is they're going to walk around and say, well, if God this, I wouldn't do that. Basically, if evil, why God? Why does God have to exist? But that's such a stupid premise. Okay. Let's look at the problem here. If there's no God, who decides morality? Let's go with this. Now, I've argued with atheists, and they're so morally bankrupt that they can't even answer this question. They'll go in a tightrope circle, and they won't answer this. Or they're going to give some really dumb explanation about different cultures. I'm going to show you in a minute. But if there's no God, let's say, who decides morality? Well, you do, right? The atheist is always trying to say, well, different cultures believe this and different cultures believe that. And so you can't really say that there's absolute morality because different cultures have this way of handling it and different cultures have that way of handling it. And it's like, well, that's a misnomer. You say, why is it a misnomer? Okay, because it doesn't matter what culture you are. There are certain things that are fixed. Okay, for example, are there some cultures that are going around teaching that murder, not killing, murder is okay? No. How about theft? No, they don't. Generally, they don't. Everybody knows you shouldn't steal. Everyone knows you shouldn't murder somebody, right? How about another one? Adultery. Taking somebody else's husband or wife. So now what the atheist is going to say is, oh, well, because they believe in moral relativism. That's what they believe. But let's take that to the extreme. If an atheist wants to believe in moral relativism, what's stopping me from stealing from them? It's not evil, isn't it? It's not evil because morality is just your perception. It's just what you think is okay. You know what the fruits of that mentality was? How about this? Genocide. Over 100 million people died in the 1900s. All of them atheists and communists. All of them. That's Mao. That's Stalin. Even though Hitler was a Roman Catholic, he was a practical atheist. He's a practical atheist. Okay, that's just to name a few. Okay, how about Mussolini? Another Roman Catholic, but he's a practical atheist. All these guys, they are responsible for over 100 million deaths. And that's just in some of the wars. That's just in some of them. You know what they taught, these guys? They taught what? Communism. They taught fascism. Actual fascism, not the liberal stuff that they teach now. Okay? These guys teach socialism. Jesus said, wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them. By their fruits ye shall know them. Socialism and communism, all this stuff. You know where it has its origins in? It has its origins in Lenin. And guess who else? Darwin. And guess who else? Karl Marx. Karl Marx was such an awesome human being that he didn't want to work a job, so he let his 2 kids starve to death. Is that supposed to be the atheist superior morals that they're always talking about? You see, the problem is if you're going around and saying that morality is relative and it just depends on the culture, who are you to tell that culture that they're evil? Who are you? You're nobody. You have no right to tell another culture that they're evil or they're good because according to you, it's just your perspective. Now, these guys are their brain is so rotted that when you when you put them on their own standard, they can't answer to it. They're always saying, oh, well, morality is just relative and it's dependent on the culture. And why are you saying that that culture is wicked and that culture this and that? And it's like, okay, let's go with that logic. If it's just your culture, what about cultures that they practice adultery? How about Asia, Japan? They have legal prostitution. You know what the Bible calls that? It calls it fornication. Are you okay with that because it's just their culture? No, of course not. You know, when the atheist their moral compass starts to open up, when something of a moral nature happens to them, all of a sudden they want justice. All of a sudden they want favor. They want mercy and grace. They want all those things. But they're on such a high pedal. They're on such a high pedal when it comes to morality, when it doesn't affect them. You know why? Because they want to play God. If there is no God, they are God. They can decide everything. See how wicked that is? That's what these men thought. These men thought they were gods. You know what it is to starve millions of your own people? What would even bring you to do that? That's why those countries, Christianity is banned. They would rather they're okay with you having your Orthodoxy church, which is just a fake Catholic church. They're okay with you having that, but they ban Bibles in those countries because they know what Christianity does, biblical Christianity. It takes away your power. But if there's no God for them to worship, they're going to worship their leader as God. And the atheist has usurped God's throne and made themselves in his position, and now they think they're just enough to say what's evil and good. See, you can't do that. Let's go to Psalms 14. Now, the problem is that the atheists, they know good and evil. They know what's right, and they know what's wrong. But by walking around and saying that morality is relative, what does it prove? You can justify yourself. It's such a pretty worldview. Why is it a pretty worldview? Because everything is okay. Everything is okay. Nothing is banned. Nothing is technically not permissible. Technically. See what I mean? Well, why? Because if morality is relative, it's just your perspective. Now, people love to talk like this. Can you live that out? Nobody can live that out. There was a philosopher, he did a book called The Amoralist, and the amoralist is a man who just takes advantage of everybody else's moral cognizance, but he himself has no morality. And it was a thought experiment. And what the philosopher was trying to get at is that such a human being is a parasite. They're just a parasite. But now, to couple on this, because everything is just morally relative and everything is okay, then what they do is they couple this with evolution. Why? Well, because you're just an animal and everything is morally relative and everything is okay, and you know what happens? Well, you came from a monkey. And do animals have morals? No, they don't. Two animals, the mother will give birth to the little baby animal out in the wild, and the mother sometimes they'll eat the animal. They'll eat her own kid. Do you eat your own kid? No, of course not. That's disgusting. That's evil. That's cannibalism. That's banned, and that's a moral commandment. It's banned in the Bible. You don't eat blood, right? But if you came from a monkey and you took millions of years to get here, and we're just trying to figure out what we're doing, and everything is just morally relative, then it's so easy to justify yourself, because if you're just a speck and a dot in the ether of 5 billion years or whatever they say, how long it took us to get here, then everything is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. They say no, because you can decide your own meaning, because everything is your perspective. It's up to you to decide what you want something to mean for yourself. But that's a paradox. If you came from nothing and you're just an animal, you will return into nothing like an animal. because you have no conscience, because you have no moral provocation. You're just living here. You just appeared here. You're living out your life, eating and drinking and having sex, and then you die and go in the grave. Is that really the meaning of life? So then they're walking around saying, "Oh, well, we got to have because morals are relative. You have to develop your own meaning because it's your perspective. But if they're relative, everything is meaningless because you came from nothing. You just came from a monkey." Don't you see how ridiculous this is? It's a religion. It's a religion. Now, what's funny is that evolution is like their main proof that God isn't real. And yet Charles Darwin, in his own book, which they love to talk about, but they haven't read his book, he even admitted himself that that evolution was a complete ridiculous idea that he came up with. He wasn't expecting people to take hold of it and make it so popular like it was. It's ridiculous. So then the question is, why would a person want to believe something like this? It's just intellectually obvious that such a thing doesn't exist, right? There is a God, and he is aware of what's going on. But what's the problem with the atheist? There's a couple problems. The problem with the atheist is that, number one, he doesn't want God's intervention. What does that mean? This atheist, the whole reason why this is pretty is because with atheism, if God doesn't exist, you can do whatever you want. You have no one to give yourself accountable to. No one. Because who's going to hold you accountable? You're just an animal, right? And animals are just going to do what they do, right? Survival of the fittest, right? Let's take their idea, survival of the fittest, to its extreme. That's what they teach in evolution. May the strongest one win, right? Okay, do we as humans put an old person to death because they're a liability to the system? If you really believe in survival of the fittest, you should believe that. That's what Hitler did before he attacked the Jews. He murdered all the old people and the sick people. Shouldn't you do that? Shouldn't you put sick people to death because they're just a liability to the system? Survival of the fittest, right? See, they don't believe that. They say it, they don't believe it because they should believe it. In fact, if the atheist feels like that they are a liability to the system and that their soul is it's such a problem because we're not getting better and better like we should be, then maybe they should take themselves out. Maybe they're the problem. No. Everybody else is the problem but them. They don't want God's intervention. They want to be able to live their life and do whatever they want without having somebody come in and see what they're doing and intervene in what they're doing, which is the next point. We live in a morally relativistic society where everyone's just trying to do their best and trying to just do what they think is right, right? And so if you're a young person in a world like this, that atheism is so pretty, what does it let you do? It lets you justify yourself. It lets you justify yourself. What does justify mean? Justify means to declare righteous. So when the atheist says there's no God, he's telling Jesus Christ that his righteousness is better than his. He's justifying himself. He's declaring himself righteous. Now, have you ever heard of a born-again Christian going around and justifying themselves? No, they know they're wicked. They know they need a savior. But the atheists are so full of themselves, they think that, no. I don't need any help from any God. I'm fine on my own. Right? Justifying oneself. Why else is atheism pretty? Well, it's escapism. The problem is, I want you to understand the problem. Notice how atheism is very popular in countries where they have a lot of quality of life and God has allowed them to prosper. Notice how it's in those countries that they're atheists, but the broke countries that are dirt broke poor, those are the ones that don't have a lot of education. They're the ones that believe in God. It's very simple why that's the case. The atheist has been born into this world and sold a lie that everything is positive. It's called positive thinking. They've sold this lie that because humanity is getting better and better and we need to strive to do better, and because of that, if things are negative, that's because of some guy who's not contributing to the cause. And so we got to get rid of him, right? And that's what these guys come from, Mussolini and these guys. Get rid of whoever's against the cause. They're positivity thinkers. So when something evil happens, you know what happens to the atheist? They say, well, there must be no God because that evil shouldn't have happened because if he was really as righteous as I was, he would come in and stop it. But that's just a really, really ridiculous worldview, because what they're not acknowledging is that they themselves are part of the problem. See, the Bible declares no righteous, no, not one. We live in an unfair, unjust world that's under a curse because of who? Our own fault. The atheists are pretending they have nothing to do with it. See how it's hypocritical. So now they're in this escapism. They're in a box. And because they're in this box, what happens is that when this fails, they assume, well, if God was really going to step in and do what I would have done, then that would prove to me that he exists. Well, silly. That doesn't disprove the existence of God if he doesn't step in the way you think he's not going to step in. You see the problem here? You see, let's say there is no God. Let's say there is no God, right? Okay, we have nuclear weapons. We have weapons of mass destruction. Humanity is going around murdering each other. We're broke and the economy is about to collapse. Who's going to step in and solve the problems? You are? We've had thousands of years for humanity to demonstrate how good we are, for us to set up a good government where we can really reign the peace and keep the peace and help the people and feed the poor and blah, blah, blah. We've had 6,000 years to demonstrate that. Has it happened once yet? No, of course it hasn't. So these guys are sitting around saying it's because God hasn't stepped in and done something. Well, you know the hypocrisy of this statement? They love to go in the Old Testament and say, why would God allow that guy to go in and destroy that nation? And why would God allow them to just, the Israelites to slaughter all those people? Well, I thought the atheist, I thought he was a morally good person. Do you know the sins that the people in Canaan were committing before God went in there and judged them? I'll list you some. Please go read Leviticus 18, 19, 20. Infanticide, murder, bestiality, rape, fornication, sorcery, witchcraft, deceit, rebellion. That's just to name a few. Now, if you are such a good atheist, if you have such good morals, how long would you let those people get away with doing that? God, in his long-suffering and mercy, he waited 400 years before he judged those nations for doing those sins. 400. If I was God, I don't know if I would wait that long. So these guys are talking about how they're such good people. They're such good people. They're such good people. But don't you notice that most atheists are liberal? Most of them are liberal. You say, why? Well, what's the liberal movement all about? Just do what you want, man. It's okay to have gay marriage. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, the fact that you stole that thing from that guy, he got what was coming to him. So it was good that it happened to him. Yeah, LGBT, man. And NAMBLA, or minor attracted persons, and all that kind of stuff. But they're good people. Now, it sounds like I'm being very hard on these people, and I am. I've been dealing with these people pretty much all my life, and they're like in another universe. They're so used to the quality and luxuries of life that God has blessed America with, and when something goes their way that they don't like, that they don't think should be the way, they just sit here and say, "Oh, if God was real, he would have stepped in." But they're so foreignly, they're so detached from real life that most of the world lives in war, most of the world lives in turmoil, most of the world is suffering, and most of the world is in a crisis. And they're thinking because those countries don't match our standards, that if God was really real, he would have stepped in and make it that way. Would you ever consider the universal law? What's the universal law of the Bible? Reaping and sowing. Reaping and sowing. And the Bible says in Hosea that if you reap winds, you shall reap whirlwinds. You always reap more than you sow. The atheist doesn't like that. Now, this whole video so far, I've been mostly condemning the hardcore, liberal, degenerate atheists. But there are some that God has, for whatever reason, put them through such a ringer that it really feels like, man, if God was real, why would he allow this to happen to me? For example, there are some kids in hospitals where they have arms growing out of their arms. You have some people in hospitals where they're missing one leg and then one leg's growing discombobulated from the other leg. And you say, well, why would God allow that? Well, it's not his fault. It's not his fault. God said, as I live, saith the Lord, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked. God doesn't take pleasure in that. But when he conceives the child is conceived in sin. Because of who? Because of our own fault. Now you might say, well, why does God leave that child in that condition? I don't know. But I know that whoever's out here allowing all this to happen, he must see what's going on. But by the atheist pretending that the God is not watching and God doesn't keep account of what's going on, you know what he has? Atheists have no hope. Have you met a real atheist? They're some of the most miserable people I've ever encountered. They're some of the most miserable, I can be speaking allegorically, but I've never met a happy atheist. Even the most self-righteous ones, they have this inner bitterness and this incompleteness because they know there's something wrong and they know they're actively rejecting God and running from him. They know it. Let me show you a verse. Psalm 14. Look what it says in verse 1. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good. The Lord looketh down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand and seek God. They are all gone aside. They are altogether become filthy. There is no that doeth good. No, not one. That verse only appears 2 times in the Bible. That's how stupid God thinks of the idea of atheism. No one was an atheist until recently. That stuff came out of Europe with the Germans and the French. But now this new age atheism, you know what the fruits of it is? Have you seen the suicide rates in men in the last 30 years? Have you seen the depression and the dejection of people in the last 20 years? That was the fruits. When everything is just do what you want, man, and just have it your way. And you can just you're going to be your own boss in your own life and just tell us and just stick your nose to authority and this and that. Well, the fruits of it was the highest depression we've ever had, the highest loneliness we've ever had, the most dejection and self-righteousness we've ever had. Negative. Everything negative. No, you're not a monkey. You did not come from a monkey. God formed you. Elihu said that we are the work of God's hands. God formed us from the dust. Okay? Now you might notice in this video, I didn't go through a lot of Bible proofs because I'll tell you once again, you should not be spending 5 minutes arguing with an atheist about the evidence of the scriptures. They're not going to believe it to begin with. You see why they're not going to believe it? Well, come on, silly. Don't you know your Bible? 1 Corinthians chapter 2. See, with another religion, when you're trying to witness and debate with them, you can argue on their terms because you have a book. Hinduism has a book. Islam has a book. Okay? Joseph Smith, Mormonism has a book. Jehovah's Witness has a book. When you're dealing with an atheist, they have nothing. They believe nothing. They are nothing. They have nothing. They are nothing. They have nothing. So these guys are always walking around, prove to me that Christianity is true. They're not going to believe it anyway. Because why? They're their own God. So if you show them all the evidence, prove to me Christianity is true. Well, they can just sit in judgment and say, well, the evidence you're not giving me is not enough. I just can't believe that. They're actually more carnal than Pentecostals because at least Pentecostals are spiritual enough to actually get saved, some of these people. The atheists, they're going by pure sight, purely what they see. They're materialists. But any fool out here knows that with the way the government runs, there has to be some spiritual principality running the show. How does a guy commit a crime for 15 years and he gets away with it? Somebody's allowing that. That's God. God's allowing that. Now, if you know your Bible, you know why the atheist asks these stupid gotcha questions. They're not interested in learning the truth. Here, look. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 14. But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Jesus raised from the dead? Nah, that sounds like a myth. Now, these men are so hardened in their hearts that even though pretty much every single agnostic, anti-Christian scholar, they're not Christians, even they know that Jesus was a real person and he exists and did the things that he did. They all know it. But these guys, they're so intelligent, they're so smart that no. Those guys, they don't know what they're talking about. Jesus is a myth. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Now, don't think for 5 minutes that God doesn't know what you're doing. Let's go to Proverbs 5. Proverbs chapter 5. God is very interested in what you're doing, and he plans to bring every man into judgment for what they have done. Go to Proverbs chapter 5. I'm going to show you 2 verses. Proverbs chapter 5. And we're going to look at one verse. Let's look at verse 21. For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his goings. That's a scary verse. Ecclesiastes 12. Ecclesiastes 12. I'm hard on atheists because the system, it's a ridiculous religion. Now, like I said earlier, some people, they become atheists because of evil that's done to them. They go through, God puts them through the ringer for whatever reason so much that it almost makes the person feel like, man, if he was really out there, he would step in, right? And I described earlier some of the horrific conditions that some of those babies and kids are in the hospitals, right? But think about this. The Bible calls Jesus a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. God let his own creation whip and beat and crucify him. Now, if he, who had no sin, came into this world and suffered under the curse and was made to be sin for sinners, what would make you think God's going to let you slide? If God put his own son through that to identify with us. What they did to Jesus on the cross is the ultimate pinnacle of how wicked humanity is. And the atheist wants you to pretend like they have nothing to do with it. But their sins put him on the cross too. Christ died for them too. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Now, whether or not the atheist believes that it's immaterial, it's going to come to pass whether or not he wants it. Now, if Christ was willing to identify with sinners so much that he let his own creation crucify and beat him and whip him, right? He's setting the standard. Christ is setting the pattern of suffering that we should follow after, how to handle suffering. I mean, if you were God, would you come into your own creation and die for them? I wouldn't. I know how evil we are. So, Christians need to stop getting on these people's levels and stop trying to appeal to them with science and stuff. And what I'm talking about is, I'm not talking about in real life. Because one-on-one, you can have these deep conversations, okay? But I'm mainly very disappointed in the online apologetics. 90% of it is trying to show the atheist all these arguments about this and that. And the Christian himself is reading out of a modern Bible perversion and doesn't have a final authority. The atheist will respect you more if you had a final authority. But because Christians are so wishy-washy, because they don't have a final authority, the atheist always catches them. And because the Christian has no final authority, he has to backpedal into science. Now, what did the Bible say about science? Go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. Because the Christian is backpedaling into science, secular science that's innately anti-God, the atheist always has one up on him. Because the Christian's not going to know about all the research papers and stuff. Now, the atheist, he hasn't read the data. He doesn't know what it says. He's made science his God, and he's going by faith that the scientists are telling him the truth because they confirm his worldview. But you as a Christian should not be playing into that. You shouldn't be spending time trying to argue about the historicity of this and that. If you're already getting into a conversation with that, you've already lost. They're not interested in hearing that. They're interested in heckling you. Real atheists. I'm not talking about the ones who are just, they haven't even thought about why they believe what they believe, and they're just practical. I'm talking about real atheists. A lot of them are into Satanism. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 20. Oh, keep that which is committed to thy trust. Avoid profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. Now, there is a real science out there. There is a real science, but it's buried in the abscess of the internet. Now, I am going to put a link in the description of a very good book. It's a $5 book called The Evolution Handbook. That book is worth 40 books on the topic. And it's a very good book you can use to witness to people who are messed up with evolution and atheism. So I'm not saying don't appeal to science, but you have to have the right science and the right understanding and the right knowledge. You can't just go on Google and then try to use their own information against them. They're just going to mock you, make fun of you, right? But the very idea, atheism, is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's an absolutely ridiculous worldview. There's nothing to substantiate it. And the only reason someone becomes one is because of the hardness of their hearts. Now, let's look at one more verse, Colossians chapter 2. I understand there's suffering in the world, and sometimes God puts people through so much stuff, and it's hard to believe that he exists. But he does exist, and he's given you unlimited amounts of evidence to believe that he exists, and he is going to do exactly what he said he'll do. And these guys are always looking for the meaning of life and trying to find what the real faith is, what the real Christianity is, what the real religion is. And God never lets them find it because they have a wicked heart. They're not looking because they really want the answer. Because if somebody's telling you the truth, you don't care how it's told to you. And that's why the King James Bible, it's the only Bible that doesn't filter God's language. And so people are against it. But if you really want the truth, you're going to find out no matter how desperate you are going to find out if you really want the truth. And you don't care how they tell it to you. Have you met any Christian walking around saying, man, Jesus was really mean? No, because he accepted the truth, right? Colossians chapter 2. Here's another warning that every Christian is supposed to be careful with in Colossians chapter 2. A lot of people are ignoring this warning, and because of that, they're getting really, really messed up. Okay? Verse 8. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy, and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. Philosophy, atheism, and philosophy, they go hand in hand. Most of the philosophers were nihilistic, hopeless, bumbling idiots who died and didn't know where they were going. If you study the Bible and you watch Brandon Peterson's videos, you see the miraculous, supernatural numbers in the scriptures. And then Albert Einstein is dying on his deathbed. A Protestant is witnessing to him, trying to get him saved. And he says, I can't believe in a God who isn't a math equation. What a stupid thing to say. The Bible's riddled with math equations and numbers. But he was a hardened German rationalist atheist. That's what happens. So now, despite my railing on them, I actually do feel bad for a lot of these people. I'm just very hard on them because you have to be. This world promotes moral relativism, and this worldview is so self-destructive, and the fruits of it are so wicked. And many people, they get converted to Christ later in their life, having been atheists so long, and now they're reaping the consequences of living that relative life. And it's just my perspective and all that. And the destruction they're reaping is very, very bad. So even though I may seem I'm hard on these people, I'm actually really concerned for these people because the consequences of this lifestyle, it's just destructive, man. And atheists don't only take the form of the evolution and the hyper science guys. Even Catholics and these guys, they're practical atheists. They're only religious because it's a pre-thing and it's a fashion statement. But they live their life as if there is no God and they're not going to give account to him. And that's just as evil. So I'll close it out on there. My next couple of videos are going to be on 7-day Adventism and Jehovah's Witness and such to such. So I hope you look forward to it. I'll make the board available. Grace be to you all.